I came across a picture the other day that has inspired me to create this video. And it's a picture of me and a really close friend who helped me through an incredibly challenging time in my life. Now, remember this day in particular. This is the picture that I created. I went to print out the picture and I put these words at the top. Never forget the one out there who needs you. And I remember promising myself that day that when I had overcome my struggles and my challenges, that I would pay it forward, that I would never forget that there was someone out there in the world that needed to hear from me. So that's what this story is about today. And it really started when I was 16. My parents went through a very challenging divorce, and I felt like my entire world had crumbled. My whole foundation, my relationships that were the closest to me in my life felt like they were in shambles. I felt abandoned. I felt like I even lost my self-worth. I abandoned myself. I was lonely. I was discouraged. There were so many things that came with that. And I also didn't know how to handle it. So what I decided to do was that there was one thing in my life that I decided I was not willing to let this experience get in the way of. And that was my dream of becoming a pharmacist. So what I did is I buried my pain and my hurt, and I buried it really deep. I buried it in busyness. I buried it in overachievement and hyper-focusing on reaching my dream. Now, if you asked me at certain times in this period, I would have told you that I was doing fine, that everything was okay. And it took me a while to realize that that wasn't actually the case. It was towards the end of my first year in pharmacy school. I had just finished 8 hours of lecture. I had mountains of homework left to do, and I was extremely exhausted. I was beyond survival mode at that point. And I got home and I walked to my bedroom, and before I could even make it to my bed, I just crumbled. And I fell to the floor and I curled up in a ball and I sobbed. And I sobbed and I sobbed. And when I finally was able to really pull myself back together, I realized that it didn't have anything to do with pharmacy school. Pharmacy had pushed me to my limits, but it had to do with everything else. It had to do with my parents' divorce and all of the hurt and the pain that I had buried. It had to do with broken relationships. It had to do with loneliness, feeling abandoned, abandoning myself, and developing unhealthy coping mechanisms. So it was in this moment that I finally was able to admit to myself that I wasn't okay and that I needed to get help. I started going to therapy. I read every possible self-help book that I could possibly get my hands on. And I dug deep for a lot of years to try and get myself to a point where I could process these things and become healthy. Now, I did survive pharmacy school and I did a residency, and I finally felt like when I got my first pharmacist job, that I had made it. I had reached my dream and everything was working out for me. But a short 9 months into that job as a pharmacist, I started to get this pain in both of my wrists. And I thought, oh, I'll just let them rest and heal for a couple weeks and everything will be okay. And within about 2 months, I was nearly bedridden. I was so sick. I was extremely fatigued, exhausted beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And I found myself in a rheumatologist's office. And I knew at that point that my life was never going to be the same. Now, I won't go into all of the details of how significantly my life has changed since then. But there's a part of my story that I have a hard time admitting and saying out loud. And that's the part where I know that stress and our mental capacity and our emotional stress can actually lead to physical health conditions, chronic illness. And I can't help but ask myself, what if I had lived differently then? How would my life be different now? And as I laid in bed for years, through the pain and the fatigue, I realized that my pain really does me no good unless I can transform it into something that is. So as I laid there in my sickness, I actually took all of my knowledge that I could possibly gather from all of my studies and my life experience, and I created a program. I created a program to help people to truly transform their lives from the inside out, so that they don't have to ask that same question of, what if I had lived differently then? How would my life be different now? I hope that you never have to ask that question. And I hope that if this inspired you, that you'll message me. Let me know what your story is. Let me know what you're going through. And if you know someone that can relate or that might benefit or might also be inspired, please share it. And I hope to be in touch with some of you. I hope that this story touches someone out there who might need it.